Welcome back home, brave heroes, and welcome to another episode of Wheel It HeroQuest. I just had a brilliant idea for a Wheel It HeroQuest. It's on to eBay to find the Wheel of Fortune board game. But I digress. Today, we're going to do something much more exciting than that. We're going to find out if World of Warcraft, the board game, will HeroQuest. This is the licensed Blizzard product board game, World of Warcraft, the board game, not the adventure game, which comes in a smaller format box and has wildly different gameplay and mechanics for 2 to 6 players ages 12 and up, from Fantasy Flight games during their golden era. If I sound excited and a bit hyped, it means that I'm actually looking forward to this because I have an unboxing video about this board game, and a lot of folks shared that this was their Grail board game and told me it was really great. I have not popped it open to actually play it for myself, but I did go hunting around online, and I absolutely had to find and save and print this set of solo rules instructions that were written by a user. I don't remember who, so I'm very sorry for not crediting them, but I will tell you, if you want these, you can find out who. Just look for World of Warcraft Solo Rules version 2.0. This was 3 pages. I just wanted to make it accessible to me and readily available whenever I wanted to try this solo. This was made back in 2008. So this was actually recommended to me by one of the viewers of my unboxing video, and I just wanted to put a spotlight on that. This game can be played solo with some homebrewed tweaks that apparently are very well balanced. I am looking forward to this, though. You see here all the stuff that the default game comes with, minus my sortation methods. Very arbitrary, but I was very happy after I got all of my miniatures sorted. It actually ended up creating a lot of empty space in the box. So who's here because of World of Warcraft, which is a very niche game that probably nobody has ever heard of. So it's a fun, like, little video game that came out a while back. It's got, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 expansions. It's very niche, pretty unknown. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of it. Who here came for the HeroQuest content? Now, speaking of niche and unknown, this one definitely flew under your radar. Has anybody out there heard of HeroQuest? Now, this is maybe the 3rd or 4th Will It HeroQuest video that I've done. You'll have to let me know what you think about this series, and in particular what you think about this video, please, in the comments. It would help out so much. But if you're new here, let me break this down for you. I have developed a very complicated, very technical system. It might as well be NASA technology, but we break it down on the back end, and I make it very simple, and we look at the miniatures, the tokens, chits, and the like, the cards, the board, the dice, and any other elements that do not fit into the above of any given board game, and I decide on your behalf, because I am the reigning authority on this topic, the subject matter expert, if you will it HeroQuest. Now, with the miniatures, which is first on our list, I was very excited, over ecstatic to be able to say that yes, they will 100%, 1000% HeroQuest. However, there are some issues you need to be aware of. This game comes with an abundance of miniatures, and they are precious. They are so well detailed. They capture perfectly the essence of every World of Warcraft mob, or at least the popular ones. I mean, there's a lot of World of Warcraft mobs. I would argue that these miniatures are more attentive to detail in their sculpts than the Dark Souls miniatures. And I would argue that because it's true. With Dark Souls, it kind of just looks like they printed out the 3D model, basically made a mold and injected the mold full of plastic. But for these, they actually have texture. And I'm going to tell you that the difference lies in the normal maps that are on the 3D models in the game. Now, normal maps has nothing to do with the actual physical product. Normal mapping is, of course I dropped it, of course it's off the table. Goodbye, spider. Can't wait to forget about that until I've boxed everything up. A normal map is like taking your 3D skeleton of a human, not like a skeleton of a human. I assume the HeroQuest skeletons were once human, but like your armature with all of its connection points, and wrapping it in sort of a skin. And we call these skins in the 3D world maps, because you unwrap them and you have a map of all of the visual data that you would see once it is applied to the 3D model. A normal map is not a representation of the colors and shapes that you would see. It is a representation of how the light should react to those spots on the same model. So you would take a 3D model, you would attach a color map or a diffuse map to it in order to give it basic characteristics like the drawing of a face, and then you would cover it in a normal map in order to show off where the light should react and how the light should react. And this technique is done so that your models can have fewer faces. You are faking the effect of 3D across a texture with the normal map, which is much less processing. And I go on this completely unnecessary nerd rant to tell you that I strongly feel like the Dark Souls miniatures were just created without the normal maps in mind. Like a 3D model without any of that information is very bare bones looking. And as good as the Dark Souls miniatures look, they could look so much better, and I think it's because they didn't take the time to fine-tune the sculpts and give them the additional detail that would actually be represented on them in their video game counterpart. Your Murlocs have all of this scaly business going on. Your spiders have bumps where there should be bumps and hair bits and lumps and eyeballs. But moving back on to the main topic here, will these HeroQuest? Absolutely yes, with some restrictions depending on your perfectionism. Now the bases are a little bit smaller, which means that these will actually be, the bases are smaller on the vast majority of the miniatures. The larger miniatures, the boss ones, of course, are going to have larger bases, but we'll circle back to that. These will actually fit very well on the classic HeroQuest board game. Now, World of Warcraft, the board game, is not a game that has a tiled grid. It does not follow a 1-inch grid convention. It uses regions and nodes, and your monsters are all created in order to populate those nodes and give you a sort of sense of their presence, which I really respect because they could have just used tokens. There is a little bit of attention paid to the scale of the miniature. Basically, this monster is larger in the game, so therefore its miniature should be larger for the board game, and that works out fine. The sense of immersion is there, but if you translate this to dungeon crawling, where the scale is a little bit more particular, or at least players who play dungeon crawlers tend to nitpick scales a little bit more particularly, and I know that I actually do this quite a bit. I need to have things relatively very, very close in scale in order to feel like the game is presenting an immersive world. Then you might be more picky. You might be picky enough that this is going to be a no-go. Where this is most egregious is if you try to play this with the 32mm current HeroQuest miniatures. They are going to stand tall where they shouldn't. For example, this is a human bandit from World of Warcraft. This is the barbarian from HeroQuest. Now, yes, of course, the barbarian should be stronger and should have a bit of a leg up on a normal human bandit in terms of musculature, and maybe even a little bit of physical size, but this is going to be basically the scale of every single hero in HeroQuest, so there is a definite scale mismatch. The scale mismatch occurs within World of Warcraft's own board game because the miniatures are already out of scale with one another, at least for the most part. To the most extent. We're going to create new words and phrases here on HashQuest. Again, this isn't something that's important when you're playing a game that utilizes regions and nodes because you're not really meant to have these creatures occupy the same close-quartered space as in a dungeon crawler. But for a dungeon crawler, it can mean a world of difference in immersion and perception of that immersion. Now, if you are using World of Warcraft's very own hero miniatures, then the scale is going to be a lot closer to that of the monsters, and the scale mismatch will at least be a little bit more consistent. This might not be the best looking example, but this is actually a dwarf on this side. This is a dwarf hunter, and this is, I think, a night elf. Could be a blood elf, but she's gray, so I can't tell because she's gray. Pretty sure she's a night elf, though, because I think she's a paladin. But your elves are understandably taller than your dwarves. Your Tauren are understandably pretty big boys compared to your other races. Put you back in your hunter section. And then this feels like it could make a little bit more sense. Just don't apply too much, hey, that's not how they are big-sized in the video game, and you'll be fine. I invented a new TikTok dance. But that's also why I say that these miniatures will mesh a lot better with the classic HeroQuest. If you are still busting that game out to play, then you absolutely could play a World of Warcraft campaign utilizing those miniatures, perhaps with your HeroQuest miniatures, or perhaps entirely separately, just using the hero miniatures that come with World of Warcraft. In either case, if the scale mismatch is holding you back, then you probably won't think that these will HeroQuest. But if you can ignore the scale mismatch, or if you are solely using the World of Warcraft miniatures and can ignore the scale mismatch within that game system's own world, which it's not too offensive anyway, then you're fine. These miniatures will 100% not only HeroQuest for the contemporary, but for the classic, because then you're just needing them to match the board. Furniture be damned. The furniture's always been oversized in HeroQuest. Change my mind. It's not a complaint, it's just an observation. Before we move on to the next topic, I want to point out that there are so many of each of these mobs that you can absolutely have them all factioned out across your board. You could definitely have a run-in with 4 Murlocs, go into another room while these Murlocs are still on the board, and have 4 more Murlocs. It's just really simple to have a ton of the same enemy. So you have a healthy amount of enemies. You're not going to have a shortage, and you can design your quests on the board around this fact. And you'll do even better if you bring in third-party stuff like the Loki's battle maps, because you'll have a lot more outdoor options where you're more likely to find a World of Warcraft scenario. I'm not saying there aren't dungeons in WoW. There's plenty of dungeons. There's plenty of indoor locations, but it would be absolutely not WoW if you didn't have outdoor stuff to play in too. War is fought on the battleground, not just in your home corridors. I spent all that time complaining about the scale mismatch, but like I said, you do have monsters with larger bases, and they can function very well as mid-bosses or bosses. A lot of the times, they're really not going to encroach outside of their base, so they are still going to be a 1x1. I don't think it would be reasonable to call this a 2x2 or anything. His base just isn't big enough for that. But every once in a while, such as in the case with these monsters, you will have a monster that will too easily encroach onto the spaces around it, thereby making it necessary to have him be a 2x2 monster, and that's what I would do with this monster. And so once again, thanks to the sheer number of these monsters, making employing them in a dungeon as entire armies of units, not only possible, but very fun to do, given that they have different colors, which also facilitates being able to have different levels of enemy, which is very common in the video game as well. It's the same enemy, but it's got a recolor, therefore it's level 5 or level 30 instead of level 1. These will HeroQuest. So we check that option off and we move on to the next one, which is tokens. I've said before, tokens is going to be very hit and miss. Generally, they're not going to HeroQuest ever unless you have a system in place that will accept them. So homebrew. And homebrew might be taken to mean that generally anything will HeroQuest. But we are going to go with the very complex calculations on the backside and say, I have a line, and if the homebrew complexity crosses that line, or the homebrew amount crosses that line, then the thing will not HeroQuest, because you can homebrew anything to do anything else. Now we have gold coins, which absolutely could be taken to mean times 10 pieces, or you could be a real masochist and hand these out in the exact amounts that they're supposed to be, but then you're going to run out and then they won't HeroQuest. But if you times these by 100 or 10 or whatever, and you take a spattering of them and you hide them around the board and the players are allowed to pick up gold pieces on their way, then yes, those will HeroQuest with no other rules as written. We have wound tokens that we can use in place of the skull markers, and you can absolutely save space or height of skull or whatever you're doing with those stupid skull tokens by using your higher denominations, but you really won't have many opportunities to do that because of so many enemies in HeroQuest having 1 body point. We've got some other tokens that you could take to mean surges for surges of action. We have backpack tokens, which I actually really like because they inspire me to think of a carrying system for HeroQuest, and there could be all kinds of discussion around that, but generally speaking, if your player collects, 5 cards, you might say that's it. You can't carry anything else unless you have a backpack. And if they have a backpack, they can carry an additional 5, maybe an additional 3. They can only have 1 backpack. Backpacks are actually a pretty big deal in World of Warcraft. There are a lot of different ones. I should really say carrying devices, holding devices. Backpacks for short, though. That's the cursive form. Everything can be a backpack. You might get like a fanny pack. You might get a small pouch. You might get a whole reagent bag, and these are going to hold varying quantities of different things. So your reagent bag might have 20 slots, but it's only going to hold reagents. And is that a thing, actually? I know categorization is, you definitely could take a backpack with 8 slots and go ahead and assign it to only carry certain things, and then when it's full, they'll spill over into another bag. But I don't know if there are any bags that only carry specific things, but there should be if there's not, because that would bring some collection, some incentive to do certain things. There are a number of other tokens here, but right now I can't think of anything to do with them. I would be homebrewing on the fly, and I don't generally want to do that. I will say if you get a spell book token, that should be taken to mean that you're spending a spell, and then you don't have to turn in the card or flip it over or consider it spent. There are a lot of systems out there for this sort of mechanic at play that are homebrew. Generally, people really want heroes to be able to reclaim their skills somehow, especially with the return of HeroQuest in 2021, which introduced heroes that are able to get their abilities back if certain conditions are met. So the book token, while a rare thing that you could hand out, could accomplish this. Spell scrolls already exist, but there are none as powerful as the blank check, both in real life and in the metaphor that I'm using. So that will be the end of the tokening for this game. Score-wise, we're going to give that one a 5 out of 10, a yes and a no, a depends on your situation. Do I think the game would be worth buying just for its miniatures if you were trying to add them to HeroQuest? Yes. For its tokens? No. But then again, it's almost always no for the tokens. Next up is cards. Cards are much easier to determine whether or not they will HeroQuest because you're going to have very specific bouts of information on the card. And sometimes you can homebrew what that information means, but we are going to take the approach of minimal homebrew. However, I will mention any obvious instances as they come to me. We're looking at one of the weapons cards here, and it's pretty evident that you would have to do some heavy lifting to translate the statistics on this card to a HeroQuest convention, so I would have to say as far as the equipment goes, it would be a no. End of your reroll step for the trinket known as the Cannonball Runner. Discard this item to place 3 hit tokens in the damage box. That actually makes no sense in a HeroQuest context. Fist of the People's Militia. This is a mace, add 3 to your dice pool, attrition 1, reroll 2. You'd have to translate the attrition, the reroll makes sense. Those aren't the only cards though, we're going to take a look at some other cards. Well, the vast majority of cards in this game are actually gear oriented, so it's either going to be weapons or armor. This is the cured leather armor, and it's got the same sort of nomenclature on it as the other cards. Hero ability, don't fail me now. But the abilities are very much formatted the same way as the gear. So we're going to move on to our non-treasure, non-gear cards. World of Warcraft has quests, and we have quests in the board game. Demon in the Depths is such a quest. We have one, I don't know what these are called, but they are in Blackwood Lake, which is here on the map. Now this map is pretty well useless in HeroQuest context unless you are traveling around the world of Warcraft, and we'll be able to see that world once we get out the board. But if you find yourself in a Blackwood Lake location, or you accept this quest, then go to Blackwood Lake in your travels, as you should be allowed to do if we're going to World of Warcraft-ize this game, then you will be able to attempt this quest and turn it in if it is successful, and your rewards will be 19 gold coins, 5 of one thing and 3 of another. Treasure levels, so we really won't be able to get much there. I think 5 experience points, which is not a HeroQuest convention. But if you defeat this monster while you are playing Demon in the Depths, or while you are attempting the Demon in the Depths quest, and you are in Blackwood Lake, you can get some rewards. The flavor text at the bottom and the level of difficulty of the quest are definitely translatable. Blighted Beasts is another example here, just to show you treasure level, experience, gold rewarded. You could use these if you are already utilizing an experience point system, but there are a few homebrew HeroQuest experience point systems, so you might be better off making your own rather than trying to retrofit one homebrew with another. Regardless if that one says it's compatible with other homebrew, we're talking about translating an entirely different game. Okay, next up we have these cards, and these cards are sort of like event cards. They are pretty specific to the mechanics of Warcraft. If a faction can defeat the enemy character on this card, every character of that faction gains 3 XP at the end of that combat. Each faction may choose to discard one of their current quest cards and replace it with a new quest card from a quest deck of their choice. The Domination War. At the end of your enemy's faction turn, if your faction is a character, you get the idea. These are not really HeroQuestable. And they use the term faction, which is poisonous to some. We're going to give the cards a no on this one. You'd really have to stretch them to be able to fit them to the game. You could do it. You could do it, because I can't tell you that you can't. You absolutely can. But I'm rating them a no on accessibility. We're actually going to skip by the board really quick and tackle the dice, and the reason for that is because it's just going to be really simple. The game comes with 3 different colors of 8-sided dice, and it comes with several of these colors, so HeroQuest doesn't use the 8-sided die. You could definitely homebrew an 8-sided die system for movement if you wanted to upgrade from your D6s. Sorry, the game calls them red movement dice. No matter the color. Blue in the Frozen Horror, it's red. Black in Crypt of Perpetual Darkness, it's red. White in the base game system of First Light, it's also red. Everything is red now. It's going to be a no. I'm not going to say the typical other D's. Don't say it. Don't say it. Or do say it, but say it in the comments. I don't care if my comment section is full of D's nuts jokes. With that, we're going to the board. Now, your board may look something like this. I mean, if it looks specifically like this, then I'm sorry. It looks like you're screwed. I don't know what you did to trigger that. The board has a couple of useful features about it, though. It has a really cool experience track that will help you. You could definitely take some tokens, 4 different colors, and place them on the start space, and then as you get experience and accomplish the different levels, give your heroes some new boons. It really wouldn't take too much thought in terms of homebrew. You could probably just award them with different pieces of equipment and call those your level bonuses. So then the experience point system ingrained makes sense because now it's board inclusive, but then you've got the turn track, which some people ignore this anyway. It can be kind of limiting for a full-on game. I've heard a lot of complaints about the turn track, but, I can't speak to it myself because I haven't played yet. Defense, attrition, and damage trackers are here. You could homebrew what it means to have so many tokens in the attrition section. But all in all, I would say that this board works if you are trying to use it to track your overall campaign, and you would need a mighty large campaign to necessitate the use of a board like this, taking up valuable real estate on your table. Generally, you could probably just take this and reduce it to a piece of printed out paper and have your heroes track out where they want to go and see what all kingdoms and realms and provinces are adjacent to where they're at for travel purposes. But you wouldn't need to have it presented like this because your heroes are not ever going to separate from one another and play various one-shots, I guess, unless people start, not showing up to the group session or whatever. But no, let's just change that. There we go. Now this represents the entire party, and you are in Sorrow Hill. You can, if you want, travel to the ruins of Andorhal. If you're on your way to the Bulwark, then that's where I would head. Or you could go to the south to Chillwind Point. You're also adjacent to Cardero if you want to tackle that quest and defeat that monster. Do these kind of map systems work in HeroQuest? Are they worth it? Do you implement them? Probably not by default, but if you are playing World of Warcraft in the HeroQuest world, then something like this might be immensely useful, especially if you're not one of those players of WoW that has thousands of hours in the game and you've already memorized exactly where all of the regions are. The board may HeroQuest. Finally, we've made it to the other section. We've basically covered everything that's in HeroQuest's wheelhouse. There's that wheel reference again. What would you do if I was serious about that? Is that like an, oh my god, he actually did it, I couldn't click on that video fast enough moment? Or is it more of a, why does this guy waste his time? But we've also taken pretty much everything out of the game box by now, so we don't have any others left. But I do like the experience point track around the main board, so I guess I would have to classify that under the other category. However, it is part of the board and we did cover it. Well, there might be an exception here. We actually have some things that don't fall under any of the other categories. We've got the hero boards here, for example. Character boards, hero boards, they're synonymous to me. You've got different places for your cards to go, but I would say that these are pretty contextual because not all hero boards have places for cards, and the cards were pretty much determined by me, the eminent expert, to not HeroQuest, and therefore the character boards will not HeroQuest. We also have these campaign boards for your chosen monster. This is the big bad that will descend upon the realm, threatening all with a total party kill, even though you're kind of working against one another. When he comes, you best be ready to put some differences aside to bring him down. At least that's in the vanilla game. The solo game, or a cooperative version of the game, things are a little bit different, but these values do not translate very well into the HeroQuest world without some absolute changing of the gear and the equipment, and it can be really, really hard to develop your own scaling system of difficulty that isn't just put more monsters in the room if the heroes have more in their party. Or at this point, the heroes should be fairly well kitted, therefore use lots of monsters. I'm not saying people haven't done it, I'm sure that they have. But answer me this, was it easy? No, it was not. And if you were going to go that route, you probably wouldn't waste time arbitrarily basing it on the World of Warcraft gear cards. I put these guys in the wrong bag. And that's the complete episode, and as always, we will apply a very specific rating based on a system. And I will rate World of Warcraft, the board game, out of a scale of 1 to 10 on the Will It HeroQuest parameters, I don't have a target out of 10. If you want to see more of these, please, please, please make your thoughts known in the comments below. I could not ask you enough for this recommendation. Also, I need to know for my own curiosity, is my audience Horde or Alliance? You need to tell me that too. You're obligated to drop that in the comments below. And don't worry, you're absolutely allowed to attack members of the opposite faction. It's a PvP battle zone down there. Thank you so much for your kind attention, brave heroes. I'll see you in the next exciting comparison. Until then, onward for now.